I want you to do this for me. I want you to look at the person on your left. Good job for those of you who actually looked the right direction. And now the other person on your other side, whichever direction you looked. I have something to tell you about them, and it's this. They have a secret. In fact, they have a lot of secrets. Maybe it's an insecurity. Maybe it's a medical issue. Maybe it's a troubled home life. Maybe it's something even really dark and seedy, like being fans of The Real Housewives. Of any county, by the way. But regardless of what the secret is, regardless of what information they are trying to conceal, they're doing it for a reason. It's innate in us to want to take certain facts and certain details about our lives and keep them to ourselves and only release them to people that we trust, people that we value, and people that understand us. But as we move forward in time, where the ability to control that information is becoming less and less easy, we have to ask ourselves, how do we protect those facts? How do we keep our privacy in a digital age? Now, I'm sure some of you in here, and maybe some of you have friends, that you've heard them say, well, if you don't have anything bad, you shouldn't worry about people knowing about it. Has anybody ever said that? Can you put your hands up high so security can escort you out? Okay. If you said that, it's fine. It seems to be a more and more common sentiment in this day and age. Well, listen, we have to give up a little bit of safety, or we have to give up a little bit of privacy in order to have safety. But all of us have our boundaries. And whether your boundary is in a hill, in a cabin with aluminum foil on the windows, or you're one of the people who says, as long as I can lock the bathroom door, I'm good. Wherever you fall on that spectrum, it's your job, along with the people sitting next to you, to come together as a community to guarantee that your privacy rights are protected. In August of 2015, the New York Times had an article, and you may have seen this in the news as well. A popular, let's call it dating website, Ashley Madison, was hacked. 10 million unique user profiles, private individuals, government officials even, their curiosities, proclivities, their infidelities, all leaked. Does that concern you? Maybe it does. Maybe you are one of the 10 million. If it doesn't, it can get worse. 2012, the Washington Post did an expose on the National Security Agency. And if you're not familiar with them, you should Google them, and then you'll be on their radar. The Washington Post found that in 2011, the prior year, the National Security Agency had 2,776 violations of its own departmental rules or federal law, meaning listening in, reading emails of individual citizens who they had no cause to do so. If you're not the Orwellian type, maybe you have some loved ones that you care about. 2009, the Lower Merion School District in Pennsylvania decided to issue laptops to their students. Great, honorable endeavor. Until 2010, when the first lawsuit was filed, when parents found out that the school officials were using these laptops to log into the camera to monitor their children's activities at home. Regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, it affects everybody in different ways. Let's talk a little bit about the law as a part of this. I think if you ask most people and you said, where do we get our privacy rights from? They would say the Fourth Amendment, the Constitution. But the Fourth Amendment really doesn't have a right to privacy in it. There is no express right to privacy in the Constitution, and that's why we all have to be involved as a community in it. If you think about it, when the Fourth Amendment was drafted, it was very much a bodily protection. It was about persons and property. For the government to do anything to you, they would have had to come and physically seize you or physically enter your property. It's not the case anymore. In 1926, there was a United States Supreme Court case called Olmstead versus United States. And by the way, there's dozens of these cases. I'm only going to go through 3, mainly because I can't send you a bill for it. But that Olmstead case was really interesting, 1926, and what happened was the FBI had planted eavesdropping devices in Mr. Olmstead's office and around his home. Went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court in 1926, Justice Taft at the time, said that there was no right to have a private conversation in the Constitution. So how do we get to where we are today, where we have this idea of a right to privacy? It was about 40 years later, a case called Griswold versus Connecticut. The court looked at a privacy issue and it came up with this great phrase. It came up with this phrase, penumbras of privacy, zones, if you want to use another term. And the Supreme Court said that those zones exist in the First Amendment, freedom of association, the Third Amendment's prohibition against having to quarter a soldier, Fourth Amendment, right to unreasonable search and seizure, the Ninth Amendment, that it's all through the Constitution. So it created this right. It created this legal fiction of a right. 3 years later, though, is where it really gets interesting, and this is where all of us come into play. 1967 in Katz versus United States, another eavesdropping case, ironically. Mr. Katz is walking down the street, goes into a phone booth, closes the door, picks up the phone, finds out after the fact when he gets arrested his conversation was being recorded. Sounds very similar to that Olmstead case. But in Katz, the court said, based on those zones of privacy, that it would have to honor a right to privacy. And it created a two-part test. The first part's subjective. Do you want privacy? Did you lock your phone? Did you close the phone booth door? The second part, though, is the really unique, novel part under the law. The second part is an objective standard. And that objective standard has the court saying, what would society expect to be kept private in that scenario? It is the only time with a right like this under the Bill of Rights that the court says, what do you think? Not, let us tell you what you have to do. They're writing that legal fiction. They're writing it decade by decade, and we essentially, as a community, as the public, are their muse. So when you start to utter a word or a phrase like, yeah, if you don't have done anything bad, you don't have anything to worry about, you should ask yourself that when you're the parent suing to try to keep your children from being spied on at home. It's an important concept under the law. But again, if you're not really intrigued by this legal aspect of it, it does tie into the governmental aspect, the big picture. Usually privacy rights are emotional. If you talk to me about privacy rights, what you will find is I will get very red in my face and I will get very animated. And some people have these emotional reactions. A psychiatrist, though, out of UCLA, Dr. Reef Karim, decided to try to place objective facts around a very emotional privacy issue. And what he did was he went back through history and he looked at instances where governments have used the idea of surveillance or eroding privacy rights. And he looked at the outcomes. If any of you are history majors, you'll have a good idea what the outcome is the government offers that for safety and then ultimately uses it for subjugation. Privacy is something, if you think of it in the context of living things. The living things in our society that have the least amount of privacy are lower down the societal rung. Taking your dog out lately? Watched it do its business? Your children, how many times have they said, can I just close my door? And you said, no, you can't. Prisoners, no privacy. Safety to subjugation. And Dr. Karim came to the conclusion that what happens is even if nothing's happening to you individually, knowing that you're being watched or knowing that your privacy is being eroded affects how you react to things. I refer to it as the rearview mirror effect. Driving, look in the rearview mirror, police car behind you, you tense up, your heart races, and you think, was I speeding? Did I have too many drinks? Did I take the mobile meth lab out of my trunk? Oh my, no, I'm just going to a TEDx. Why am I worried about this? But we have that response when we're watched. Dr. Sidney Girard, who did a lot of his privacy research back in the 60s and 70s as technology really started to come on board, wanted to study the personal aspect of it. He said, forget about community, forget about the government. What about the personal side of things? And what he studied were groups of people that had limited privacy rights. By the way, not just prisoners. He means he took people and he studied them in environments where they couldn't shield facts, where they couldn't present the face they wanted to present. And what he found that those people had higher instances of depression, anxiety, and that oftentimes it manifested in physical pain. He decided that what this means is that the privacy aspect of it is that we have to have the term that he used, zones. Zones to vent. Think about the last time you had a breakdown and you got home and you thought to yourself, I hope nobody at work saw me do that. It's something that we all have to do. The important aspect of Dr. Girard's research is that it affects each of us individually, whether we realize it or not. In the end, as we move forward, where's this all going to go? 2011, the FAA issued 317 permits for law enforcement drone use, and another couple dozen for private drone use. 2015, that number jumped up to a little over 4,000. By 2020, they expect to be issuing about 30 to 40,000 unique permits or renewals every year. Technology is going from where a drone used to be the size of a Buick to now it's the size of your iPhone. It went from not being able to capture anything but a live broadcast to now being able to store thousands of gigabytes of information at any given time. Law enforcement agencies across the country are establishing a thing called drone zones. Sound fun? Not fun. What they're going to do is they're going to put up drones in the air that would monitor, record, store, to be used at any time in the future that they see fit. If you're still thinking, I don't do anything wrong, it's not going to matter to me, wait till the time that that gets hacked and your phone conversation is leaked online, taken out of context, your email is pulled aside. All of us have had the moment where you got an email from a group, hit reply, sent back a snarky reply to one of your friends in that group, hit send, heard the swoosh, looked down and thought, oh my, I did reply all. We have to be able to keep those things secret. So where the technology is going to go in the future is it's going to get smaller, it's going to become more pervasive, and it's going to become easier to be used, taken out of context, and abused. If you're one of those people, any one of the spectrum, mountain in the woods, locking the bathroom door, it doesn't matter to me. What does matter to me is this, is that you recognize that we have a unique opportunity under the law. We have a unique opportunity under law to establish a community where we say we care about privacy rights on both ends of the spectrum. Whenever you're thinking about the privacy that you have and the privacy that you could eventually lose, I just want you to keep this in mind, and this goes back to Dr. Gerard's research quite a bit. If we cannot protect ourselves, ultimately, we cannot be ourselves. Thank you.